As a country, New Zealand hasn't been around that long. Some say we don't even exist. But in its short existence, New Zealand's been responsible for some surprisingly important and some not so important inventions. Here's a few of them. Number 1. The disposable hypodermic syringe, invented by pharmacist and veterinarian Colin Murdoch in 1956. Colin Murdoch was a pharmacist and veterinarian from Christchurch. Early on in his career, he recognized the risk of infection that reusable glass hypodermic syringes posed. So, in 1956, he designed a plastic single-use hypodermic syringe that, at first, was deemed too futuristic by the New Zealand Ministry of Health. Murdoch eventually patented the design anyway, and it obviously became very popular, and, to date, it's one of the most important developments in human medicine. Later on, he also invented the tranquilizer gun.
Ow! Oh!
Number 2. The referee whistle, invented by William Atack in 1884. Rugby is incredibly important to New Zealand's existence, so it makes sense that the simple referee's whistle was pioneered in New Zealand in the late 1800s by William Atack of Canterbury. Until this revolutionary idea, sports referees simply shouted at players. As a referee himself, Atack got tired of raising his voice until one day he got two teams to agree to play to a whistle that he would pull from his pocket, as opposed to his just screaming. Rugby lawmakers in England got wind of this revolutionary concept, and it quickly spread there as well as onto other sports. Number 3. The EGGBEATER, invented by Ernest Godwin in 1900. Not being happy with being a champion rower, cyclist, and swimmer, Dunedin resident Ernest Godwin turned his skills to the house and home after he ended up fathering 10 children. He became obsessed with making everyday domestic chores easier and looked to improve on household tools and appliances. In 1900, Godwin patented a hand-powered egg beater that could prepare eggs in just 3 minutes, as opposed to the regular 15 it was taking to do by other means? Long story short, Godwin turned out to be an incredibly successful inventor and entrepreneur. Godwin also invented several very successful fuel economizing devices for the internal combustion engine. He eventually moved to the USA, where he set up a business that supplied his fuel technologies to car producers, public transportation companies, and even the US military. A real unsung hero of New Zealand history, in my opinion. Number 4. The AEROPLANE, invented by Richard Pearce in 1902 to 1903. The Wright brothers are well known for being the first people to ever achieve powered flight in December of 1903. But were they actually the first? In 1899, Richard Pearce of Waitohi in South Canterbury began working on several ideas and designs for a powered aircraft, and in March of 1903 actually achieved powered flight some 8 months before the Wright brothers. Pearce didn't record his early attempts and even downplayed his efforts, saying that he didn't achieve proper flight. But several eyewitnesses that day, including entries made in the local school's diary, state that Pearce achieved flight for 50 yards before crashing into his own property's gorse fence. He attempted several other flights throughout the year and several more after the Wright brothers' famous flight in December 1903. Over the years, there's been a lot of contention about whether or not Pearce actually achieved the world's first powered flight. Maybe he did, but it certainly wasn't a controlled flight though. That honor may very well belong to the USA's Wright brothers. Number 6. Nuclear Physics by Ernest Rutherford. Well known in New Zealand, but outside of New Zealand it might be a surprise to some to learn that the father of modern nuclear physics was New Zealander Ernest Rutherford. Ernest Rutherford was from Nelson, but later took up professorships in Canada and the UK. His most famous achievements were the discovery of alpha and beta rays, the discovery of radioactive decay, a Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1908, which was the first ever Nobel Prize won by someone from the Southern Hemisphere, and the first artificially induced nuclear reaction. His work laid down the foundations for nuclear physics and the first ever splitting of the atom by his two students, John Cockcroft and Ernest Walton, in 1937. Number 7. Jogging by Arthur Lydiard in 1960.
Jogging. I believe it's jogging or yogging. It might be a soft J. I'm not sure, but apparently you just run for an extended period of time.
It's hard to believe these days, but before 1960, jogging as a tool for athletic training and cardiovascular health wasn't really a thing. In fact, running for extended periods of time was considered dangerous by many in the health profession. That was until a marathon runner from Auckland, Arthur Lydiard, popularized jogging as a training method in athletics and also as a great tool for cardiovascular health. And why wouldn't you believe him? Arthur Lydiard made a name for himself coaching several of New Zealand's best ever distance runners such as Peter Snell and Murray Halberg. His successes in fitness coaching led to Runner's World magazine calling him the greatest running coach of all time, and he quickly became sought after as a coach worldwide. Later on in his life, he spent much of his time in the United States, where he worked as a coach and consultant. Number 8. Bungee Jumping by A.J. Hackett in 1987. In the early 1980s, A.J. Hackett and fellow adventurer Chris Skigglecow found a way to mimic the experience of killing yourself without actually killing yourself. They developed bungee jumping after seeing the Vanuatuan ritual of land diving. In 1987, Hackett put bungee jumping into the mainstream by jumping off the Eiffel Tower in Paris, which he also earned a short jail term for. When he returned to New Zealand though, everyone was talking about bungee jumping, and in 1988 he created A.J. Hackett Bungee, the world's first commercial bungee jumping company. The business quickly expanded worldwide, and the name A.J. Hackett became synonymous with the term bungee jumping. He's often credited for starting New Zealand's entire adventure tourism industry. So there you go. Those are 8 revolutionary inventions from New Zealand. I think at least 1 or 2 of these are going to be completely new to a lot of people. Do you know of any other great New Zealand inventions? If so, comment about them below. And whether or not you've invented a giant plastic ball that can roll you down a hill without breaking your neck, you're still a great New Zealander if you watched this whole video.